Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Commander Crucible. Today, we're going to be looking at the partner commanders from the Atrimi Forever Playful deck, the Sultai one that came with C20 linked with Ikoria. So right away, I just love partner commanders. I think that back in 2016 when they came out with the Atraxa line like Thrasios and Tymna, arguably one of the most powerful CEDH decks. Well, now that Flash is banned, that might change. But I love the idea of partners. And back then, partners were pretty broken because you could pair them with whoever you want. As long as they said partner, you could make them partners with anyone else that said partner. But I really love where Wizards is going currently, where they're forcing you to use partners together. When they say, this creature partners with another creature. You can't just partner it with any creature that has partner. This style came out in Battle Bond, and it's continued here in C20. So for this Commander Quick Look, we're going to be looking at Ukkima, the Stalking Shadow, and Cazur, the Ruthless Stalker. So right away, we have Ukkima being 3 mana, 1 blue and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature Whale Wolf. So he partners with Cazur, but Ukkima reads, he can't be blocked, and when Ukkima leaves the battlefield, it deals X damage to target player and you gain X life where X is its power. Cazur is a 4 mana, 3 generic, 1 green, 3/3 that just says, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on that creature. So right away when you read these, their style, their synergy really works together. Cazur is obviously the lower end of the pairing, and this deck really wants to focus more on Ukkima, as Ukkima is the one who's getting the more powerful ability. He's dealing X damage and you gain X life, so it just keeps you in the game longer. And these are colors that really don't usually gain life like this. They like to deal mass damage, but Sultai doesn't really gain life, so it's really cool that we're getting this ability. And even if it's small, obviously Ukkima is just a 2/2, and he has to leave the battlefield, so it's not when he dies, so he doesn't have to go to the graveyard, so he can get exiled, bounced, flickered, whatever, as long as he's leaving. He's going to deal that damage and gain you that life, and he does it to a target player, so he's not going to hit the whole board, so you're really going to have to focus on one person and then focus on building Ukkima's power back up. Cazur is nice because he doesn't have something that just says, whenever Ukkima deals combat damage to a player, Ukkima gets +1/+1. He will affect your entire team. So Ukkima having unblockable is really nice, so you don't have to waste equipment slots in your deck to make Ukkima unblockable to get him to deal damage to build his power up. He just does that naturally, and that's what I really like about these two commander pairings. So with all that being said, why don't we jump right into the quick look. First off, you know me, I love to start with the other legendary creatures that you can put in the deck, and right away we're going to include another partner pairing being Pier, Imaginative Rascal, and Toothy, Imaginary Friend. Pier is a 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 1/1. When he enters the battlefield, he's going to be able to fetch you Toothy out of your deck to your hand, or the other way around. When Toothy enters, he's going to fetch you Pier, so you're always going to get these two at the same time. Pier says if one or more counters would be put on a permanent your team controls, that many +1 of each kind of those counters is put on that permanent instead. So when Ukkima deals combat damage and Cazur gives him the +1/+1, he's going to get 2 +1/+1s instead. Pier is just that little bit of boost, and it's for any kind of counters if you happen to have any others in your deck. Now Toothy is just, the reason we're including him is because he partners with Pier and he is able to be run in these colors. So whenever you draw a card, you're going to put a 1/1 counter on Toothy, and if Pier is out, you'll put an additional one. And then when Toothy leaves the battlefield, you're going to draw for each 1/1 counter on Toothy. Again, it's just a little bit of support. It's not really fitting the deck theme with Ukkima and Cazur, but he's just allowing some card draw, and if you run Pier and you are able to run Toothy, why not? The next legend is Edric's Spymaster of Trest for 3 mana, 1 green and a blue for a 2/2. So again, Edric's not really fitting the theme. He doesn't care about 1/1 counters. He's not going to buff Ukkima, but he's just going to allow us to draw cards, keep our deck rolling. As he says, whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may draw a card. Ukkima is unblockable, so he's always going to be dealing combat damage to someone, so you're going to get that bonus card draw. It influences your opponents to hit each other. Edric is just really good. He's a strong deck in his own right, and so I thought to slot him in here. Next we have Vorel of the Hullclade, same casting as Edric, 1 green and a blue for a 1/4. Vorel is a human merfolk, and he says pay a green and a blue and tap him, and you double the number of each kind of counter on target artifact, creature, or land. So if we manage to get Ukkima even just 2 +1/+1 counters, we tap Vorel, you double it, give him 4, peers out, you give him an extra 1. So then he will have 5 +1/+1 counters, making him a 7/7. And if we bounce him from the battlefield, he's going to deal 7 damage, and you gain 7 life. It doesn't seem like much, but over time, if we're able to do that consistently, just put 1/1 counters on Ukkima, double it with Vorel, we're really going to start racking up damage to all of our opponents, hopefully as we ping them individually, as Ukkima does not hit all of them. The last legend I have here is Rayhan, Lost of the Abzan. She is 1 generic, a black and a green for a 0/0, but she enters the battlefield with 3 1/1 counters, and whenever a creature you control dies or is put into the command zone, if it had 1 or more 1/1 counters, you may put that many 1/1 counters on a target creature. So Rayhan is one of the partner commanders that I talked about earlier, so she can partner with anyone, but she's just really good value for this deck, as we are going to want to focus on giving Ukkima these +1/+1 counters all the time. We just want to make Ukkima the biggest, strongest whale wolf that we can, and when he leaves, so you'll notice that Rayhan says when a creature dies, now that creature would have to enter the graveyard from play, and if it's your commander, you would have to choose the zone, not the command zone. You would have to forcibly put it in the graveyard for that to trigger, but Rayhan also says, or the command zone. So we don't have to have Ukkima sit in the graveyard until we can get him out. We can simply just have Ukkima go to the command zone and still distribute his +1/+1 counters, which is why Rayhan is pretty awesome in this deck. Moving on to our next section, which I'll be calling Buffing Ukkima. It's just going to be a whole section on how we can get more +1/+1 counters onto Ukkima, as that is going to be the goal of this deck. Cazur is just going to help us do that, but the main goal of this quick look is going to be how to make Ukkima huge, and then being able to flicker him to start dealing some damage and gaining life. So the first card we're going to look at is Winding Constrictor out of Kaladesh for a black and a green. It's a 2/3, and it says something very similar to Pier. So when 1 or more counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, put that many +1. And if you would get 1 or more counters, you get that many +1 also. So again, this is just going to help if Ukkima deals damage and Winding Constrictor's out. Instead of 1 +1/+1, he's going to get 2, which will just help him get bigger faster. A new card that came out with Ikoria is the Ozolith. So for 1 colorless mana, it's a legendary artifact that says whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, doesn't have to die, if it had counters on it, put those counters onto the Ozolith. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from Ozolith onto target creature. So if we have 5 +1/+1 counters on Ukkima, and we bounce him forcibly, and he leaves the battlefield, 5 counters are going to go onto the Ozolith. Ukkima will re-enter. Then at the beginning of combat, we're going to put those 5 counters back on Ukkima from the Ozolith. Now if we have any other kind of counters, like the ones included in Ikoria being hexproof, indestructible counters, something like that, those can also be transferred to Ukkima, which is just icing on the cake with the Ozolith. Really strong card. Next we have Hardened Scales. For 1 green, it's an enchantment that just says if 1 or more 1/1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are placed on it instead. Just doing something very similar to Winding Constrictor and Pier, we're just going to try and get as many +1/+1 counters on Ukkima as possible. Corpsejack Menace. It's 2 generic, a black and a green for a 4/4 creature fungus. If 1 or more 1/1 counters would be put onto a creature you control, twice that many 1/1 counters are put on it instead. So you can really start to see how this deck wants to function. You're just going to want to put all your counters on Ukkima, you're going to double them, you're going to get 1 extra from Winding Constrictor, Hardened Scales, and Pier, and Corpsejack Menace is going to double all of them, and it wants to function in this way where you're just buffing Ukkima as fast as you can. The next card is Hadana's Climb. For 1, a green and a blue, it's a legendary enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Then if that creature has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, transform Hidama's Climb. And when we meet that requirement of having 3 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature, we're going to transform Hidama's Climb into the Winged Temple of Orazca. Now this is a legendary land that allows us to add 1 mana of any color to our pool if we need it, or we can pay 3 mana, 1 a green and a blue, and tap this land, so technically 4 mana, and target creature you control gains flying and gets +X/+X, where X is its power. So if Ukkima is just massive, we're going to be able to double his power and give him flying. He already has unblockable, but you never know in Commander on how someone can get around unblockable. So this is just a good way to effectively double Ukkima's power, and it is until the end of turn. So you're not going to get 1/1 counters, but if we're able to flicker or bounce Ukkima during our turn, and we do that, and his power is doubled by Hidama's Climb, it is just going to be great, and we're going to get that much more damage and life gain. The next is Forgotten Ancient for 3 and a green. It is a creature elemental. Whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto another creature. So Forgotten Ancient is just one of those cards in Commander where it always just gets massive. So as we pass our turn, we cast Forgotten Ancient. All of our opponents, the Spell Slingers, just playing Mana Rocks, whatever, they're going to cast those, and we are just going to rack up +1/+1 counters on the Forgotten Ancient. Then at the beginning of our upkeep, we're going to just give all those counters to Ukkima, and he's going to turn from this little 2/2 into a giant creature. He's already unblockable. He's dealing commander damage. If he gets removed by an opponent, you still deal damage to them, or you can deal damage, then bounce him, then deal more damage. That's just how this deck wants to function. And lastly, we have Master Biomancer for 2, a green and a blue. He's an elf wizard. Each other creature you control enters the battlefield with a number of additional 1/1 counters on equal to Master Biomancer's power, and is a mutant in addition to its other types. So Master Biomancer is a 2/4, and so when we flicker Ukkima, he's going to lose all his 1/1 counters. Obviously, he will re-enter as a 2/2, but Master Biomancer, if he is not buffed at all, he's just going to give Ukkima another +2/+2. That's without our Hardened Scales, without Winding Constrictor, without Pier or Corpsejack Menace. And still, that's just making Ukkima a 4/4 that you didn't have to do anything to get. He was a 2/2, he is now a 4/4, and that's simply just having those two things interact with each other. The next section is how to bounce or flicker Ukkima effectively. So we're going to first look at Conjurer's Closet. Everyone pretty much knows this card or has played against it or included it in one of their decks. It is a 5 generic mana artifact that says at the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. This is after we've had an entire one of our turns to buff Ukkima, we deal combat damage, then at the beginning of our end step we're going to flicker him, bounce him, he's going to re-enter as a 2/2, but hopefully you're going to have things in place to make him stronger as he re-enters. He will attack and tap, and the Conjurer's Closet will make him come back untapped, hopefully with our Master Biomancer or whatnot. We're going to make Ukkima bigger again, and he'll be able to block for us on the crackback. Next is the infamous Deadeye Navigator for 4 blue-blue. Soulbound, you may pair this creature with another unpaired creature. When either enters the battlefield, they remain paired for as long as you control both of them, and as long as Deadeye Navigator is paired with another creature, each of those creatures has pay 1 and a blue, exile this creature, return to the battlefield under your control. Now this is much better than Conjurer's Closet, as you can do that at instant speed, so if Ukkima is somehow blocked or targeted with a destroy spell, you can flicker him so you don't have to recast him. Ukkima will leave the battlefield, that spell will resolve, have no targets as Ukkima is gone. He will re-enter then as a new Ukkima, he will deal the damage as he leaves. Again, he'll re-enter as the 2/2, but hopefully we can get him bigger right as he enters. The next two aren't as powerful as something like Deadeye Navigator or Conjurer's Closet, as they are one-time effects, but they essentially do the same thing. Displace and Ghostly Flicker, they're both the same mana cost, they're both at instant speed, which is why I included them. So for 2 and a blue, we can exile up to 2 target creatures we control, then return those cards to the battlefield under our control. So this is just going to allow us to target Ukkima if he's faced with, let's say, a board wipe or something like a removal spell, and then we can also flicker something else. Again, in the case of a board wipe, we can flicker Ukkima and Cazur. This is honestly just in case. It says up to. Ghostly Flicker says 2, but Displace says up to, so we can choose to just do Ukkima with Displace, but it's really not going to hurt us with Ghostly Flicker, if we just have something leave and come back, as Ukkima is really the one that we want to have counters on anyway. The next is the Nephalia Smuggler. So for 1 blue, he's a 1/1, but it says pay 4 mana, 3 and a blue, and tap the Nephalia Smuggler, and we're going to exile another target creature we control, then return that card to the battlefield under our control. Pretty self-explanatory, I don't think I need to say much on that. So Thassa Deep Dwelling is a cheaper, blue costing Conjurer's Closet. So she's a legendary enchantment creature god for 3 and a blue. She's indestructible, and she's not a creature unless our devotion is 5 or greater. At the beginning of our end step, we're going to exile another target creature and return it to the battlefield under our control. She also has pay 3 and a blue, and you're going to tap a target creature. So she does more than Conjurer's Closet, she costs less, but she's restrictive as she's 1 blue, but it's not going to hurt us in this deck, as it is only 1 blue. Next we have Cloudstone Curio. So for 3 generic mana, whenever a non-artifact permanent comes into play under your control, you may return another permanent you control that shares a permanent type with it to its owner's hand. So if we cast a creature, we can then bounce Ukkima to our hand, deal damage, cast Ukkima, bounce that creature. We're always going to have a creature in hand to make sure that we're going to be able to bounce Ukkima with the Cloudstone Curio. Next we have Crystal Shard, so same casting cost, 3 generic, but Crystal Shard says pay 3 mana and tap the Crystal Shard, or 1 blue and tap the Crystal Shard. Return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. So the Crystal Shard can be used against our opponents. We can target them if they're tapped out. We can return a creature to their hand that's problematic, or a token, but mainly we're going to be wanting to target ourselves. We're going to want to target Ukkima. We're obviously not going to pay the 1 generic and return Ukkima to our hand, and then deal the damage based on his counters and be able to recast him. 2 cards that also function very similarly to the Crystal Shard is Equilibrium, which is an enchantment for 1 blue. Whenever you play a creature spell, you may pay 1. If you do, return target creature to your owner's hand. So it's kind of like the Crystal Shard and the Cloudstone Curio formed into 1 enchantment. Erratic Portal for 4 generic mana, pay 1 and tap the Erratic Portal, return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. Again, really self-explanatory. It's just really nice to have multiple options of cards that do the same thing in your deck so you can make sure that you get that effect. Last but not least is our good stuff section. So first up in the good stuff section we have the Fallen Shinobi. So right away it has Ninjutsu, which is you may pay the Ninjutsu cost and return an unblocked attacker you control to your hand. Put this card onto the battlefield from your hand, tapped and attacking. So Ninjutsu cards are going to allow us, Ukkima's already unblockable, so he will never be blocked, so we can Ninjutsu something in to get the Ninjutsu effect, and then we're returning Ukkima to our hand, making him leave the battlefield, dealing the damage from his counters, and then we're able to recast him, as he's only 3 mana. So first off, the Fallen Shinobi, who is 3 black and a blue, is a zombie ninja with Ninjutsu 4, so we're paying 1 less than its casting cost. Whenever Fallen Shinobi deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library, and until end of turn, you may cast those cards without paying their mana cost. So for 4 mana, we're getting to make Ukkima leave, deal damage, hit with the 5/4 Fallen Shinobi, and cast 2 spells from our opponents without paying their mana cost if we hit them off the top is insanely valuable to us in this deck, as we're able to deal damage and play our opponent's spells and bounce Ukkima. It's just, this one card is doing a lot of things for us and everything this deck wants to do to make sure you win the game. Next we have Ink Eyes, Servant of Oni, who is 4 black for a 5/4. Her ninjutsu cost is 5, 3 black. Whenever Ink Eyes, Servant of Oni deals combat damage to a player, you may put target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. She also has pay 1 and a black to regenerate Ink Eyes. Now, again, Ukkima's unblockable, so we're going to return Ukkima to our hand. We're going to get back a huge creature, hopefully, that either died or was milled in some way from an opponent. So Ink Eyes is just a really good inclusion. Her ninjutsu cost is a little high of 5 mana, but again, having Ukkima never able to be blocked is going to make sure that you get those ninjutsu costs. The last ninjutsu card is the Ninja of the Deep Hours, so he is a 3 and a blue for a 2/2, or his ninjutsu cost is just 1 and a blue, very cheap. Whenever Ninja of the Deep Hours deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. really self-explanatory. Next card I want to talk about is Hero's Blade. For 2 generic mana, equipped creature gets +3/+2. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield, under your control you may attach Hero's Blade to it. Its equip cost is 4, so that's way too high, honestly. Its casting cost is 2, and we're going to be flickering Ukkima all the time, so the blade says whenever it enters, so we don't have to actually cast Ukkima to get this to resolve. So if we flicker Ukkima, we can just instantly attach the Hero's Blade to it. It makes Ukkima a 5/4, which will just make his power larger, so when we do flicker him, we're going to deal 5 damage instead of 2. Ukkima comes back, you instantly attach the Hero's Blade back onto Ukkima. Hydra's Growth. I feel like I've been talking about this card a lot to my friends, my playgroup, my LGS, but Hydra's Growth is really cool. So for 2 and a green, it's an enchantment aura. We're going to enchant Ukkima, and Hydra's Growth is going to put a 1/1 counter when it enters the battlefield onto Ukkima. Then at the beginning of our upkeep, we're going to double the amount of 1/1 counters on the enchanted creature. So this deck just wants to put 1/1 counters on Ukkima. Hopefully we have more than just the one that Hydra's Growth is giving him. Let's say we have 5. We put the Hydra's Growth on him, it gives him another one to give him 6 counters. Now, let's say he lives around the battlefield. We get back to our turn. At the beginning of our upkeep, that's going to double. So we're going to actually get 12 +1/+1 counters on Ukkima, making him a 14/14. And hopefully later in the game, you flicker Ukkima, someone kills him, you're going to deal 14 to their face, you're going to gain 14 life. Maybe you just kill them outright, you have 14 more life, which is just a huge advantage for you. The next card we're going to look at is Rancor. So for 1 green, it's an enchantment, which gives the enchanted creature +2 and trample. Ukkima can't be blocked, so the trample is probably not going to be what you're focusing on. But when Rancor is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Rancor to its owner's hand. So when we enchant Ukkima, we make him a 4/2, we flicker Ukkima. Now he leaves, Rancor then was on the battlefield and goes to our graveyard as it becomes unattached to Ukkima. When it does that, it just returns back to our hand. Then we cast Ukkima again and enchant him with the Rancor once again for 1 green, make Ukkima a 4/2. It seems like really good value, really strong for a really cheap card. Just being 1 green mana and just making Ukkima already stronger as he enters is going to be very valuable to you. That is all the cards I actually have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed this Commander Quick Look as we have broken down Ukkima and Cazur. They are part of the new partner commanders that came out with C20, and I love the fact that every deck got partner commanders. Obviously that's how it worked back in the Atraxa days and in the 4-color decks, but I just think that this new round of partner commanders, they really were taking time to design around this partner mechanic. They weren't designed to be busted, but they were all designed to be very fun and unique in their own ways. And what I mean by that is that Ukkima and Cazur are not really the strongest by any means. They are very powerful, and the Command Zone already talked about how to go infinite with Ukkima. I will link to that video down below if you want them to explain that. We're here at the Commander Crucible. We don't really encourage infinite combos or going infinite, but again, if you'd like to do that, more power to you. Just make sure to tell your play group or whoever you're playing against that you have that in your deck so they know what to expect. But I love this, the power level, the abilities, the thing that Ukkima and Cazur are trying to do. They both work very well with each other, as Ukkima just wants to get counters and leave the battlefield, and Cazur is just giving him counters. It's not the most powerful, as he just gives him a +1/+1 when he deals damage, but Ukkima can't be blocked, so he'll always get a +1/+1 counter if Cazur is out. Cazur affects your entire team. Now, Cazur seems like the weaker of the pair, but he gives a 1/1 counter to your entire team whenever they deal damage to an opponent. So it's a really strong ability that could just be overlooked, and if you start racking up +1/+1 counters over time, or if you're designing your deck to be mostly unblockable creatures, your 2/2s, 1/1s, they're just going to get massive towards the end of the game, because Cazur is just going to keep giving them +1/+1 counters as they deal damage. So don't overlook Cazur, but Ukkima is definitely the one that you want to focus on in this deck. Again, I think Wizards is moving in a really cool, fun direction with these partners, making them only partner with one another as they did in Battle Bond. But I just love them. I love partner commanders. I think it's insanely strong having 2 cards in your command zone, and it's really fun having these 2 cheaper, low power, low toughness creatures that just have really solid, good abilities. So if you have any ideas of what commander you'd like to take a quick look at next, leave it in the comments below. And thanks for watching.